Okay, so Jinx and Harley Quinn. I want to talk about three main topics here, I guess categories of topics as points of difference. Stakes and tension, depth and cohesion, and restraint. And I think it's particularly interesting with these characters just because they do seem so similar, and they're compared a lot. And the writers of Arcane were very open about admitting that that Harley Quinn was one of the key inspirations behind Jinx. But the characters definitely diverged at a certain point, and I think everyone can tell that the characters ended up quite different. But also, just to preface some of the heavier criticism here that I'm going to be laying on Harley Quinn, I do think this character accomplished its goals perfectly. And I'm judging it by different standards here and kind of harsher standards, but we'll get to that at the end.
I paid your girlfriend a visit this morning.
What did you do?
I made her a snack. Sheesh, I'm not that crazy.
Huh? What was that? I should kill everyone and escape? Sorry. The voices. I'm kidding. That's not what they really said.
Okay, so both of these scenes are about characters making the "how crazy am I" joke, right? So what's the difference? Okay, so two things I want to talk about here. So stakes and tension. First of all, the stakes. So the "how crazy am I" question really, really matters here in the Jinx scene, right? So I don't know about you, I freaked out when I saw it when I was watching the scene, and the setup makes us think that there's no other possibility. Like it's very, very clearly leading to the fact that Jinx cut off Caitlyn's head and is serving it on the platter, to her sister, to her girlfriend. And we know that Jinx has been pushed to her limits here and that she is crazy. So I was firmly with Vi with my expectations here. And so it mattered. The bottom line is that it matters. Harley's scene is a gag. It's a punchline for the trailer. Doesn't really matter what she's hallucinating here. And for this scene, that's okay, right? But this is a consistent theme throughout the Suicide movies, that how crazy Harley is doesn't matter at all. And the fact that she became crazy in the first place also doesn't really matter at all. Arcane spent 3 episodes building up Jinx's character without crazy, right? So that we could specifically become attached to that, to Powder. Powder being like a fully developed character with goals, with relationship arcs that were either destroyed entirely or left unresolved. And then post time skip, then every moment we see Jinx acting crazy, it's a reminder of those dark, painful scenes, right? Of those unresolved goals. And every time we see her trying to rise above the delusions and above the trauma, then it's a chance that we'll get to see this character that we really cared about get the love she craves, and the love she deserves. And also, I mean, it's even worse because we know with Jinx that the crazy isn't just a consequence of the character's goals not being met. It's also a barrier now to her ever getting to fulfill those goals. So the point here is that it matters. It's something that really impacts kind of the parts about the character that we care about, the things that we long to see in the character, promises that were made when this character was established, that have been unfulfilled and that are being interfered with because of this trait of craziness. And then the other thing going on here is the tension. And I think it's so interesting that with these characters we get to see 2 completely different takes on instability. We have Arcane's instability, which is really an active state of conflict, and I would say it's more literal. We're not on stable ground. We're wavering, right? Sometimes Jinx is crazy, and sometimes she's kind of more cool-headed, more sensible, or at least trying to be more cool-headed and sensible.
Shut up. It's just a goodbye hug.
We don't know which one we're going to get with her. And that uncertainty, that unpredictability, that creates tension, and that really ramps up any scene that has stakes in it. That we don't know if it's Caitlyn's head or not. And for Harley, we do kind of know. With her, instability is just kind of synonymous with crazy, and we see it kind of expressed as a constant state of acting crazy in one way or another throughout these movies. If she's not blowing up a building, she's buying a hyena. She's making a joke where she shouldn't. She's kicking a corpse for no reason. She's binge drinking, pole dancing, hurting a random character for no reason. It's a pretty static trait, and it's one. It's a trait that you could say is even like a strangely stable form of instability. We know pretty much what to expect with Harley, and so this makes it a lot harder to use for augmenting conflict. It's much easier to use it just as a punchline or as an aesthetic, and that's that is what we get.
I know, just some wannabe street trash. I got confused, that's all. Now, he thinks I'm weak. Savika will clean it up. Savika's a regular Johnny on the spot. I'm not weak.
Oh shit, is that a hyena in a bathtub?
I named him Bruce after that hunky wine guy. He's my little dumpling, aren't you? Aren't you, my little baby? Aren't you, Brucey? No. I never said that. I love you both equally. That counts.
Okay, so both of these are living environments of crazy people, right? But let's figure out what the upshot is here for each one. So for Jinx, we have her lab, and we see the scribbles everywhere, and we see, the life-size dummies of the family that she killed by accident. And the thing that's so interesting to me about this is that all these different elements, they speak to something much deeper than just a generic, superficial crazy. Jinx is obsessive. She gets carried away. Right, she's like a child, but not just because it's like a creepy, quirky kind of child aesthetic. She's like a child because her trauma, happened to her when she was a kid, and it left her mentally stunted at that age. Right, her desire not to be alone, which we've always known about this character, it's now become like this desperation. It's become delusion, right, and also it's become extremely obsessive. And you can look at these elements of the setting, and you can imagine Jinx working on these for hours, these mannequins, right? Then we look at Harley, and, hyenas are random, stuffed beaver, kind of random. The target on the wall, it's a sign that she's impulsive and, that she doesn't really care. The way Suicide Squad generally does crazy, it's shallow. And you can see it even more if you move outside of Harley Quinn. It's even more egregious, with just how focused on the aesthetic it is, and also just emphasizing things like recklessness and violence, randomness. It's characters calling other characters crazy. It's very surface level. And in Arcane, it's a step deeper. It's you could always go deeper. It's not like the deepest, most nuanced expression of crazy ever. But it is more nuanced, and it's because of that, it's more interesting it's more interesting to show obsessive behavior, to show loss of control, to show instability, to show stunted mental development, than to just show a character saying, calling another character craziness.
She's just crazy.
I think that's another huge difference here, that dealing with any topic at depth is much more interesting, does much more for a story than just using it kind of as a fashion statement, as a punchline. But also in Arcane, there's a story purpose being served here as well, a character purpose. So let's look back to that idea of childhood trauma, right? So childhood trauma, stunting mental development. Look at the cohesive whole here that the expressions of craziness are forming for us. Why does Jinx scribble all over the walls? Because mentally she's a little girl. Why does she make her guns look like her favorite animals? Because mentally she's a little girl. Why does she do the finale scene at a tea party? Little girl, right? Why does she mess with people and pull pranks and giggle like a little girl all the time? Because she's a little girl, right? Her art style is, basically that of a little girl playing with crayons. Her hallucinations take the form of her crayon-type drawings, in this brilliant way of, this really immersive way of having us almost be inside her head, like that world is bleeding out, into reality. and this mentally stunted little girl. What did the little girl Jinx want? Right, she wanted to be loved, she wanted to be cared for, and with that we have these life-size dummies. The delusions take the form and the voice of the family that she accidentally killed. It also is the cause of the weird attachment she has for her new father figure that seems like kind of creepy, but in this infantile way. And how did this little girl version of Jinx, how did Powder plan on accomplishing her goals originally? Right, it was by making inventions that worked, right, so that she could be a useful member of the gang. And that's exactly what grown-up Jinx is still doing, but just to this obsessive and reckless degree, with the same hopes of getting the same love that she longed for, and we can see to the point that she's taken it, that's probably not going to happen. It's become a barrier to her being seen as normal by anyone except this kind of creepy father figure that she had. Definitely, it's something that we can see turns Vi off when she sees how desperate and kind of how to the crazed point that Jinx has taken this to. But the point here is that crazy isn't just a spectacle for the audience to sit back and be entertained by. It's a way of exploring where the character is at with her goals, with her relationships, her conflicts. It's a way of filling out our picture of the character. And it's so consistent with Arcane. You can sum up Jinx's character in basically one sentence, and then every element of her craziness is relevant to that character definition. And then Harley's character, on the other hand, is just completely disjointed. We have the pet hyena, the stuffed beaver. We have, she's a martial arts master, right? She hears voices, maybe. She obsesses over the egg sandwich. She's reckless. She's making jokes at inappropriate situations. There's this line where she says, "Are you the devil?" which just doesn't fit in anywhere. There's the scene where she breaks a window for a designer purse. We see her getting out of control in general. Kind of just with this binge drinking, pole dancing, kind of hurting random people. There's a lot of throwaway gags, but it doesn't match up to none of the parts match up to each other, and it doesn't form any cohesive whole. So so the lack of cohesion and the lack of depth, that's a huge difference between these characters. With one we really do get a full picture, and we're really using this character trait to explore the character, and with the other it's just randomness, it's punchlines, it's the crazy girl aesthetic, and that's it.
To fight, you're not ready.
Crap. Him too?
What I want to talk about with this scene is a little bit more subtle. These are two very different scenes with very different aims. But what is the commonality? So these are two examples of characters not having a speck of empathy for the life of someone dying next to them. And we get two reactions. So from Harley, we see her kind of just generally annoyed with her situation. We get the comical expression, the body thumping to the ground in a funny way. And then from Jinx, granted, this is a bit different. She is killing this person, but that almost makes it more impactful. That what we get is something actually surprisingly quiet for a scene that's this loud overall. We get relief, but it's relief mixed with like nothing, if that makes sense. Once she realizes this girl isn't her sister, it's like the snap reaction. Just get rid of it. I don't want to be thinking these thoughts anymore. Bang, just like swatting a fly. And we get this contrast between Echo's shock at what she just did and her obliviousness. Like she's just so self-absorbed by this moment that she had that she barely noticed the fact that she just killed this person. So it is relief, but there's this eerie emptiness to it too, and that's kind of what I wanted to point out. I think both scenes are trying to use restraint here, which is kind of funny. It's one of the only places in the suicide movies I think where they do attempt to use restraint to get like a specific type of humor, and the movie does get its gag. And the thing is and like it is still sort of hammed up. It's meant to be funny, and they give it kind of enough juice to make us laugh. Um, and then you see Arcane, they really stepped into the restraint here, more so than usual throughout the series. They really held back. They could have played with any number of kind of emotional dials here for Jinx's reaction. They could have made her more annoyed, more frustrated. They could have had her be kind of enraged. They could have had her be more crazed, made her kind of having this out of control moment, or even just make her notice what she did. But they chose this extremely toned down relief, which itself is a pretty psychopathic reaction. But then by holding back anything else at all, then that's how we got this vacant, absent look that's just unnerving from her. It's this moment of real, raw, undiluted psychopathy. And I'm not faulting Birds of Prey for trying to make us laugh. I'm not arguing that they should have done something different, or they should have done something like Arcane. I do think the scene was successful. I think it did what it was supposed to do. The point of all this is just to compare what two different stories get out of similar scenes. The scenes where the same thing is happening, and it seems like Suicide Squad, or the Suicide Squad franchise, they have this kind of lower limit on the minimum amount of ham and loudness and flashiness that each second of the movies kind of have to have, and it's all in an attempt to make an impact, but they're cutting out all of these options where restraint can make a scene even more impactful. But I want to talk about the big picture restraint here. Let me show you something. So here's the cast of Arcane. We got Crazy Girl, we got Boxer Girl, we got famous scientist, sharpshooter, rich kid, crafty politician, sinister mob boss. Okay. Now here's the cast of Suicide Squad. Okay, we got crazy clown guy, we got crazy clown girl, we got crazy Australian, we got crazy crocodile, we got crazy fire guy, we got crazy witch, we got crazy Japanese lady. There's this strong dilution effect with the Suicide Squad movies. It's just all crazy all the time, and it gets kind of boring. It gets kind of uninteresting. The characters' lines are interchangeable. We're at the same level of intensity at this one thing this whole time, and it doesn't help the fact that it's all randomness and gags. It's nothing so varied. And with restraint, you can tone things down, and it actually gets more interesting. And I feel like that's something that Suicide Squad was just not on the radar of options. They just wanted to be so loud all the time, and that was their only focus. And they sacrificed a lot of like dynamism and meaning because of that. When you can see the contrast, then the emphasis is a lot stronger. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about with Jinx specifically is and most of this I covered in kind of a general way already, but just to give you a complete picture here, I think it's important to show how the writers of Arcane realize that crazy cannot be an effective character definition. Even once we have this more dynamic approach to instability, right, where we're actually not sure there's actual tension. Crazy is something that is not so easy to work with. It's not so easy to establish character goals for a crazy character. It's hard to establish relationships, and it's also just not really relatable. And you see all these difficulties with Harley Quinn, that they don't really know what to do with a crazy thing besides make gags for the trailer. Harley is a character with goals so vague that even she's surprised when Enchantress shows her like her supposed vision of the future where her goals are fulfilled. And for relationships, things feel either superficial, they feel misplaced. Why does Deadshot suddenly value Harley Quinn so much? Or it's just uncharacteristic, like Harley Quinn's relationship with the little thief girl in Birds of Prey. It's this relationship that forces her to act kind of so far out of character that it's diluting the craziness further. And then with the relatability, I just don't care about this character, and I don't think that's I think that's by design. I don't think these elements are made to kind of shock you and attract you and stuff like that. It's not made to have this deep care about. But that said, look at what Arcane did with Jinx. So they realized, okay, here's these challenges with the crazy character archetype. So let's make this character fully formed without the crazy. Let's get the audience attached to that version of the character, and then we can use crazy not as a character definition, but as a character corrupter. Powder is established pursuing a set of goals. She has relationships, she has skills, she has a life. right? And then we see Jinx with the same character, pursuing the same goals, same relationships, same skills, same life, but all of these elements have been corrupted by this crazy factor. It's a beautiful setup, and they kind of don't use Jinx so much beyond that. She doesn't appear. She's this fan favorite, but to the writer's credit, they don't have her appearing in 20 minutes out of the 40 minutes of each episode. They use her sparingly so that they can just focus on these elements of kind of how she's been corrupted as powder. But yeah, it's such a beautiful setup, and the thing that's most impressive about it is you don't need to be aware of it, to understand how, or I guess to experience how it benefits the story. It just works. Okay, but the question remains: people love this character, right? So what's going on? I don't think these people are just like gigantic DC extended universe fans, right? You see all these people dressing up as a character. Okay, so I think this is speculative. It could be a ton of reasons. This is a bit of armchair psychology, so take it or leave it. I think this character represents a fantasy, and you can see it in a lot of different expressions. You go back to Harley's intro scene. We're not introducing a one-note character who's just crazy and that's it. No, and this is gonna sound like I'm making a joke. I promise I'm not. We're not introducing a one-note character. We're introducing a two-note character, crazy and sexy. Okay, sounds superficial, shallow, whatever, but this does make a gigantic difference because it's the relationship between these two notes. That's the fantasy that this character is targeting. That you can lose control, and that will make you attractive. That will gain you status. That will make you dangerous and strong. I think it's a version of the good girl gone bad type of fantasy. You do have this backstory where she's this kind of straight-laced doctor, and she even says like, "I turned out all right. I got a PhD." And this character is conventionally attractive, but then once she loses control, then it bumps it up a level, right? And that this quality attractiveness, we usually associate beauty and status with people kind of at the top of the pyramid. People in the in group, people who fit the mold, who live kind of within the strict social guidelines of society. You work out, you're responsible, you diet, you follow the etiquette, you do what you're supposed to do. And then you get these qualities, by contrast, then you have moments when you're an emotional mess. It's quite ugly. It's seen as pitiful by society. It's seen as weak, embarrassing. It's the opposite of what would make you sexy and gain you status. And then here you have this heroine who's fully out of control. Who's breaking all the rules. Who's visually a mess in a lot of ways, mismatched. Makeup running, gaudy, trashy. And this character is saying, "What if you could be all of this and it could make you hotter?" Right? And I think there's a lot of people out there who can relate to that fantasy. If anything, it's comparable to the Hulk in a lot of ways. So you have this fantasy that anger issues also socially kind of looked down upon and characterized as problem causing, destructive. Losing control of your anger and rage can make you a hero. There's a lot of people out there who are holding all that in. People who are struggling when it comes out, people who are playing by the rules and kind of keeping it cool because they have to, who wish things weren't that way. They wish the opposite was true, that you could let it all out, go nuts, get angry, be a ball of rage, and that would make you more effective at solving problems, enable you to save the day, be loved. Anyway, so it's interesting that a character based within a story can become popular independent of that story and independent of the quality of that story and even independent of the quality of the character in that story, but just purely because of this external thing the character represents. It's worth pointing out that just like Harley kind of failed miserably in what Arcane was trying to do, i.e. tell a good story, Arcane Jinx doesn't embody a fantasy like Harley does either, and that's something that Harley Quinn has over Jinx. It is interesting, actually, that pre-Arcane Jinx is a closer fit to that. She's similarly just focused on the mad scientist girl aesthetic and the mad scientist girl gags. Also interesting that the mad scientist fantasy kind of works in the same way as the fantasies that I was talking about, by letting loose and abandoning like kind of the rigid rules of rationality and giving it to madness. That makes us magically able to accomplish these scientific feats that we just couldn't when we were sane. It is very similar. And Arcane Jinx does do this, but she doesn't embody that fantasy like Harley does with her fantasy. And it is a more niche fantasy. But yeah, it's not the focus. With Arcane, then Starry is the focus. But that said, like I mentioned earlier, this is definitely more speculative. So this armchair psychology portion of the video, take it or leave it. Maybe the appeal of Harley Quinn is something else entirely. Maybe it's something much more nuanced, something much more having to do with like Starry archetypes and stuff like that, or with the history of the character. Or maybe it is just Margot Robbie.
You're hot, Cupcake.